Rapture, a so-called utopia buried deep beneath the sea, and has been run by some of the loopiest rulers of all time, each with their own idea of paradise. Let's get started. Rapture was built by businessman Andrew Ryan. A little bit more about Ryan. He was born in Russia in the early 19th century, and in 1917 he witnessed the Russian Revolution, which eventually led to the Bolsheviks, which made Russia communist. Being under communist rule, which, let's face it, isn't really that much fun for anyone, Ryan developed a hatred for communism and sharing in general, and he decided that he wanted to make something of himself in the land of opportunity. Anyways, Ryan fled from Russia to America in 1919, and he flourished. Over the next 10 years, he opened businesses and lived the high life. But around 1930, the same time as the Wall Street crash, his devotion to America would start to be tested. The government started wanting more and more of Andrew's wealth through taxes and stuff to help with the depression, but he didn't like the idea of paying for others getting by. Now, some might say that Ryan was a bit eccentric, and nothing supports this more than the little tale of the summer retreat. So Ryan bought this large forest as a personal retreat and kicked any inhabitants living in his lands out. In response, the government attempted to nationalise the land as the park, so everybody could use it. Basically, the land would be shared. Now, Ryan isn't the kind of man who wants to share his toys with anyone, so he had the forest burnt to the ground so that no one could have it, claiming it was better burnt than in the hands of parasites. The final straw for Ryan was at the end of World War II, with the atomic bomb being dropped on Hiroshima. In Ryan's eyes, this was an outrage. Not because of the massive loss in human life, but he hated the idea of so much power being in the hands of what he saw as parasites. As well as this, he knew that it would only be a matter of time before the communists got a bomb, and he knew that there was going to be a Cold War, but he believed that, well, it would end in destruction. Now, Ryan was a bit of a prepper, but whilst others may have built a small shelter in their back garden next to the vegetable patch, Ryan did something a bit better. You know, build a giant underwater city, that kind of stuff. His idea was to create a city where the so-called parasites could not touch him, where the artist would not fear the censor, a place where a man could live off the sweat of his own brow. He started by picking a location. Somewhere where he could create his city free from prying eyes of the world's two superpowers, at this time the USA and the USSR. For this reason he chose the Atlantic Ocean. In particular between Iceland and Greenland. Interesting fact, it was only 433 kilometres away from Iceland's capital city, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Starting construction in 1945, not even a year after the war, one of the first to be let in on Ryan's project was Sullivan, a man who had been in Ryan's employ for years. He had been the head of security due to his past in police work. Ryan, having friends in all the right places, secured mass amounts of construction experts, including Simon and Daniel Wales, who would act as the head architects for Rapture. As well as this, Ryan had a crack team of scientists who made the deep-sea city habitable. To avoid attention, Ryan and his like-minded associates secretly bought materials and had them sail out to a destination and dropped onto the seabed in submersible pods, where the city would then be constructed by deep-sea welders, and eventually Luneta rings were constructed to lower materials. By 1946, Rapture received its first residents, but building work wasn't completed until the end of the 1940s, and some side projects continued until 1951. When the city was finally complete. Now let's take a quick break to talk about science and how the city works. I mean, how is it powered, waterproofed, and how does it survive under the great pressure of the deep blue? Majority of the foundations are made from reinforced concrete along with aluminium due to its resistance to water and just general strength. The sharp architecture, well, that's just there to look pretty. It's said that Ryan based the city around New York. Oh, all it's missing is a giant statue of him. Oh, wait, there it is. One of those big problems with living under the ocean is air, and the fact that there isn't any. So, did the residents of Rapture just grow gills? Well, no. The answer, of course, was the Arcadia, an undersea garden filled with trees which, as we know, provide oxygen through photosynthesis. But that requires sunlight, right? Yes, and for this reason, it's in one of the highest parts of Rapture to get sunlight through the ocean, and it uses some artificial light just to balance things out. The oxygen's then pumped all around Rapture, so yeah, everybody gets to breathe. Yay! One more little problem that Rapture faces is how do they power the city? Unless they found a way of making power through burning fish, or Ryan owns the world's largest share in candles, then the city should be in the dark. The answer, my friend, is geothermal energy. This involves the process of harnessing heat from the Earth's core to produce power. Ryan picked the location for his city well. Iceland is in a literal hotspot, as it's on the mid-Atlantic ridge, which basically means there's more heat. As well as this being underground only makes it easier to access the heat, as the seabed is far closer to the core than dry land. Damn, that is way too much science for one day. Anyway, back to the story. Now, Ryan got his secret city that neither the USA or the USSR knows the location of, and being a free place where artists will not fear the censor, large amounts of specialist workers, such as scientists, artists, and doctors, flocked into the city, which led to a boom in technology and, well, controversial artwork. Now, this might seem like quite a good thing, but unfortunately with a society based around freedom, morality tends to go out the window, or out the airlock in this case. As well as this, all the labourers that Ryan had employed to build Rapture were fairly useless now. All property was privately owned, and there were a huge gap between the excessively rich and powerful and the low everyday labourer, who would now be unable to get any help because Ryan believed that people who need help are in fact parasites. With every morsel in the city being privately owned, public programs were non-existent, so men found themselves without work a lot of the time, and everything had a cost: food, healthcare, hell, even the oxygen. For obvious reasons, the lower class began to despise Ryan and the new elitist civilization he created. Ryan began to get paranoid with the Cold War, the majority of his citizens hating him, and just, general rich guy problems, whilst others started to take advantage of Rapture's freedom. For these paranoid reasons, Ryan ordered an edict on the city, which basically means he refused to contact any of the outside world to keep his city secret. And when I was saying that mortality kind of goes out the window, well, that's kind of what happened with a new substance called Adam. Adam is a substance taken from sea slugs, which, when mixed with human cells, replaces them with, unstable ones, which makes you be able to do all of the crazy shit you do when you're playing Bioshock, such as shoot fire out of your hands. Anyways, a notorious gangster named Frank Fontaine, who made his money through smuggling artifacts into the city, began to industrialise this, and he was the one behind the Little Sisters orphanage. He may not have been the brains behind it, but it was Fontaine who funded the entire thing to get more of the Adam. Anyway, with high tensions of the Adam-enraged city and Fontaine deciding to make a bid for power, he opened a home for the poor to win the population, which enraged Ryan as he saw this as helping who he saw as parasites. In return, Ryan declared war on smuggling and started cutting down the plasmid trade. Eventually, it got more violent as Fontaine started raising an army of splicers in his poorhouses, and when Ryan moved to arrest Fontaine, he faked his own death and returned as the revolutionary— wait, there's going to be a spoiler— Atlas. With Fontaine out the way, Ryan took control of the plasmid trade and Fontaine Futuristics, and founded Ryan Industries. But with Fontaine's death, Atlas was born, and the poor started seeing him as a freedom fighter. Of course, on New Year's 1958, a group of Atlas's splicer thugs attacked the Kashmir restaurant, where many of Rapture's elites were dining to celebrate the new year. The result was a bloodbath. The thugs massacred many, and in many ways this was the start of the Rapture Civil War. The city turned into a war zone overnight, with crazed splicers paid by Ryan to somehow keep Atlas at bay, and Atlas waiting for his opportunity to take revenge on Ryan. This war continues all the way to the events of the first Bioshock game, but we are not going to talk about that because I do not permit spoilers. Apart from the one I said a few minutes ago. So, in a nutshell, that's Rapture. From its somewhat humble beginnings to its quite horrific completion, all dreamed up by one man's desperate attempt to escape the government policies of the time. Of course, Ryan wasn't the only ruler of Rapture, but I'll leave you to discover that in the games.